All right. Welcome, everybody. It is March 21st, 2024. I will call the Newcastle Planning Board meeting to order. The time is 6:32 p.m. Second thing on the agenda is the review of our minutes from our February 15th meeting. Do I have a motion on the minutes? Lucas moves.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Do we have any conversation, corrections, comments about the minutes from our last meeting? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes? Passes 3-0. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
All right. Item 3A, old business. This is a continuation, I believe, just correct me if I'm wrong, we had tabled this. Was that right?
Technically, I don't know what we did. We left it open. I remember we
We left it
specifically
open.
said the public hearing is not closed. So, public
Right,
hearing is still open or reopening,
okay.
whatever it is.
So it's a
the same.
continuation
Yes.
of a public hearing about a special use permit, large project plan and entrance review for 745 US Route 1, tax map 3, lot 24, applicant Midco Solar LLC. Want to come back up? Good to see you again. Mine too. It's I started wearing a hat. I don't want to blind people, you know.
Well, no, I feel bad for
Yeah. So this is a continuation of a proposed project for a solar farm on Route 1, on the north side of Route 1,
It's
south
on the
side. of
south
Route 1.
side.
South side of Route 1.
Or yeah.
Yep. Over across the street from Rennie's roughly. Yeah, a little further south. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure where to go with this because we've already heard from you about what what the proposal is. I think we've gone over everything. We've reviewed it for completeness. We have,
So I mean, we do have a member of the public who's here to
Absolutely,
ask
yes.
questions. I guess I'd like to either briefly describe it and let him ask questions, or if you have questions ready, ask them. I think that's consistent with keeping the public hearing open, so.
perfect. Why don't you,
I had a couple of questions and I asked you, beforehand. I was just curious as to vegetation control. There are a lot of stories about some of the big farms inland with large quantities of herbicides being used.
Yeah.
It's
John, I'm sorry to interrupt. The microphone situation, if you could just come sit up.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
don't really, it's just,
It's not it doesn't amplify your voice. It's just so that people watching can hear us.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a concern about large scale herbicide use.
Yeah, yeah,
And I am told that some solar farms do this.
yeah, yeah.
I'd like to not see that happen in Newcastle. And that's kind of my biggest concern, that and decommissioning, and the decommissioning is built in, which I was glad to hear. And there, I guess won't be any herbicides used. Will that be written into the contract or?
I think it's in our application, but I'm not sure.
So off the top of my head, I don't remember the word herbicide being used. I just remember that it was going to be mowed and maintained. It was
Yeah,
going to be
mode is great, but
Right.
said something about no chemical control or something like that.
I don't believe there's any standards about the like herbicides or anything in the current ordinance. Something maybe is worth considering, but like the applicant said, it's in their application. So
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything about herbicides or pesticides use. The DEP would really be the regulating body, I think, for that, because we don't have any standards about that.
The DEP if you have a licensed applicator for herbicides,
Mhm.
that person has to be licensed through the DEP.
Mhm.
If you own a facility and you do the spraying yourself, you don't need a
That's-
license, so
that's
long
how
as you
it works.
follow the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. Following the rules for proper containment and runoff and stormwater management, all that stuff.
Yes, and the amount of spray and when you
Right.
spray and.
Right.
And so forth.
Yeah.
So they basically are taking people at their word.
Yeah.
That it's being done properly.
Right.
If it's being done at all.
So what I would say is I'm unaware of a project this small that using herbicides. We'd be fine with a condition that said if herbicides were to be used, it would be applied by a licensed contractor,
Hmm.
not by the owner, and then that sort of, then you know whoever's doing it is duly licensed and it's their job to do it, not just Joe with a bag of herbicide.
I'm less concerned with that as to just using them at all. I mean, if there are other alternatives, and it sounds like there are mowing,
As I said, yeah,
sheep, goats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are doing that.
Yeah,
In a lot of
agrivoltaic
places.
is big.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's one of the things I would like to see either in a Newcastle ordinance or in this contract, and maybe moving forward, we could town of Newcastle could work on solar ordinance. And the only other thing that is concern for me is, I guess you probably have a chain link fence around
Yeah.
this, and this isn't huge. This isn't like some of them.
Right.
So probably with 11 acres, you don't really need a wildlife corridor, but I know they are putting wildlife corridors through some of them. Just because it does take that out of, wildlife no longer use it.
Yeah, so these are, as you suggested, the total acreage disturbed is 11.7 to 59. That includes the roadway. We're not gonna be interfering with normal wildlife movement through here. There's not, the road itself isn't fenced. It's sort of going around it. There'll be a cleared area where there'll be hedge habitat for the critters that use that. But for the most part, I suspect animals that want to stay in wooded will be able to just stay in wooded the same way they have now. We're not significantly expanding the width of the road that already existed. That's kind of why we're using that road. It's already there as a timber management.
Are there any plans, if I may,
Mm.
Mr. Chair, are there any plans in the future to expand this facility? It's good, 11 acres and it's gonna stay 11.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it for now. I'll listen to, if you have anything else to, I guess you've already given your presentation.
It was really good too. I'm sorry.
Can I catch it on, is it on?
It is. All of these are recorded. Yeah, they're all online.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, these are just great questions, John, and I'm thinking about the fact that the state is grappling with the PFAS situation. And
Exactly.
and I think that might be what you're alluding to, as well as just herbicide, use in general. And I know that the state's been working with the town on a comprehensive PFAS mitigation plan, because we have some contamination in town. It's not a bad idea to consider something a little bit more stringent outside of agricultural uses.
Right.
I think agricultural has its own set of regulations.
Yeah.
That they have to follow, and but we don't want another situation like finding ourselves stuck with a PFAS type situation 20 years down the road. We could have done something about it today. So thank you for the consideration. That's good thoughts.
I can also just say to the wildlife concerns, I believe that the fencing that was proposed, it was going to have basically access for smaller animals. I don't know if it was at the bottom or every so often.
So it's there right now for most solar facilities, they're using what's called wildlife friendly fencing, which has a small gap at the bottom that can allow for smaller animals coming through. The wildlife corridors you're talking about, though, are for larger facilities where deer, moose, larger animals can't get from point A to point B without going around a large facility, and they create these corridors through. The wildlife corridors are primarily for sort of large animals.
And,
So
and for probably for the larger arrays as well, the larger systems.
When you, yeah, with the ones that are on 200, 300 acres, you
Yeah.
probably need to think about that. How do they get, from where they normally forage to water to other places? It's just not a concern here.
Does the wildlife friendly fencing allow smaller predators to get in, foxes, bobcats? Yeah, because
I
I
don't know about bobcats. I don't.
think they're about the same size as fox, maybe a little bigger.
I always feel like foxes are just more slippery, but yeah, no,
Because you get rodents going through the chain link fence. and
Right,
there's
yeah.
nothing there-
Mhm.
No,
nothing there to
no,
take care of.
right, no,
Proliferation.
so yes, I think that, smaller mammals like foxes, raccoons, et cetera, can get in
And so on the wildlife corridor, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, I did get an email or a call from Coastal Rivers Conservation Trust, and they were curious about the remainder of the property, and if this was the same project as the other solar array, that project that went in. And so they apparently moose do go through this general area, just up and down the peninsula here, and they do have some conservation somewhere, and I think they said we could get in touch with the property owner about possibly conserving other parts of the property, the remainder of the property and something. So I think you addressed the issue of like this specific project is not maybe going to have a huge impact on moose or larger animals, but it is something that fortunately Coastal Rivers is paying attention to.
Yeah, that's great. Any more of your presentation or am I out of luck? I gotta go back to my computer, I guess.
Go back to dinner or whatever you're doing. You left a piece of paper there.
All right.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
So, because this is a special use permit, I mean, we can discuss this idea, I guess, of pesticides, herbicides, and attaching it as a condition. Do you have a suggestion, or do you feel like it's covered? And
So what I would, so I don't think they're going to use it, but would be comfortable with a provision that said as part of the building permit application, the applicant will describe how they'll handle vegetative management, including any potential uses of herbicides and pesticides.
I think in light of the fact that we have no actual standards to point to about this type of regulation, that would probably be the most that we could probably approve as a condition on the
And you'd
application.
have some idea of what it was going to be used for. I can tell you that, and no one's approached me yet, but I can tell you, having been in a couple of hearings lately, PFAS properties, one of the things people are talking about for these farmlands is, can we put solar on them?
Mhm.
And there's legislation to try to deal with the legal liabilities associated with that. But in any case, you may get more solar projects coming into town, and it's probably good for you to hear from a small project like this, if they expect to use it, and if so, how much they expect to use it and how they expect to do it. If for nothing else than a point of information for you.
I think that's great, honestly, and I'm really glad this got brought up. So I'd be in favor of attaching the condition, as you said, that you would
Mhm.
include language to describe how, and I'm not going to repeat it. What you said
What you said.
sounds great.
Okay,
Does that work?
it's fine with me. I said it. so
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be hard for me to argue.
How about you guys? You
I
got
think that
anything?
sounds.
And so
that's-
just make sure that I understand the condition would be that the applicant would provide details for any future herbicide use with the,
Part of the I can say it again, it's part of the submission for the building permit application.
Mhm.
The applicant will provide details on vegetative management, including the potential uses of herbicides or pesticides.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
It's a while.
You got the language down, and my tongue is a little tied tonight. I appreciate it. I think if we don't have anything else, no other issues, we can go ahead and make a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor? And provided your draft finding of facts from last time we were here.
Yeah, I mean, I updated a few things based on the conversation we had, which is mostly around, it was actually for large project plan, which is mainly that it complies with the rest of the ordinance, which we went through, but then there was also like the purpose of the comprehensive plan and the ordinance, which
Mhm.
we discussed. So that's mostly what was updated. The only thing that I've got highlighted in yellow here as kind of still pending was to approve. I didn't have any conditions at the time, so
Mhm.
we'll approve with a condition,
Mhm.
but provide a conditional approval, which you just discussed or just
Very nicely articulated.
articulated. That's right. So that's it. Only as far as if when the board is content with all of this, I think that kind of adopting the draft findings of fact and conclusions of law as amended.
Yep.
And then could move to approve the application consistent with that.
Could I,
Yeah.
make another recommendation for a condition? Which sounds unusual, but
No,
I've been doing this for a while.
it's fantastic. You're one of the greatest applicants we've ever had. You're like, give me more conditions.
Well, it's just at the last meeting, we were specifically asked about training for emergency personnel.
Yes.
And we sent a letter saying we would do that.
Yep.
But as we all know, these things go on and sometimes they get lost. If we make it a permit condition, it tends to stay a little bit longer in people's heads. So
Yeah.
if we could have language to the effect of, prior to operation of the facility, 2 trainings for interested emergency personnel will be provided.
As our second condition of approval.
I mean, you may have others too. I'm just throwing out the ones I.
No, I
We
think
should
that's
have.
great. And I think that, does that,
I've already mentioned it to the chief and
Okay,
we've
great.
already discussed it. That'd be a really good idea.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got that in the findings, I think. But as a condition,
I just think it will last longer.
Mhm.
It's one of those things that the Knox boxes I don't worry about. Everybody's using Knox boxes now. Training isn't something that is a natural thing you do when you're doing these projects, and I think it should be, but it's not yet. So
Great.
this will teach the applicant not to show up.
This is wonderful. All right. Do we have anything else we need to discuss? I mean, I feel like we have covered all the bases and beaten this up pretty good. All right, well then I will, we'll use your language here with conditions. I'll make the motion to approve with the stated conditions, special use permit, large project plan, entrance application dated November 21st, 2023, revised through March 21st, 2024, submitted by Midcoast Solar LLC for 745 use
the US one.
US Route 1, Newcastle, Maine, map 3, lot 24. Do we have a second?
A second.
Who wants it?
You're faster.
Lucas was fastest on the draw. Any further discussion about the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? That passes 3-0.
No, sorry, I'm not gonna be able to come here and eat. It's been nice the last 3 meetings.
Yeah.
Great places to eat around here. Say that coming from Portland. So
Good.
thank you for that. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to being a good neighbor.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for everything. It's been a pleasure. All right.
Guys,
Thanks, John. Good to see you.
Oh, John, what was your last name for the record?
McCain, MC, capital K, A-N-E.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night. All right. So at the moment, we find ourselves in the position having on our agenda under new business, a pre-submittal application for an applicant that unfortunately is not here. So we are unable to have that discussion. So we'll hold that for a future meeting.
I mean, I've
And-
provided you all with what's been submitted so far. I
Mhm.
think there's still some material that we'll need from the applicant. Haven't spoken with them, so.
That's fine. So let's move on. Have a great night. Under other business, actually, let's do it this way. Let's do owner's report, and then I'd like to add something to the agenda. Do you have other comments?
Of the required.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The thing, as far as other projects or other things that are going on, we've got the public hearing for all of the amendment changes a week from today, I believe. Check that.
28th,
That's right.
yeah. At 6:30.
Yes, 6:30 here. That will be for the core zoning code and for shoreland zoning. We are, I think the way that it is, we're still working on the map. I've got a draft here. Everything that's on here is correct as far as where the districts will be. The things that are still kind of shaking out are where the actual streams and where the geography is exactly. And I say that that's an important just note because the map doesn't rule when it comes to geography. So it's like if there's a stream on the map, and then you go in your backyard and the stream's not there, well, then shoreline zoning doesn't, you're not within shoreline zone. If there's a stream, if the stream's not on the map and you go into your backyard and the stream is there, then you do fall in shoreline zoning. So there's that. But as far as like whether you're in the new village center or the maritime activities or residential, limited commercial, that's the map, and that's all been updated on here, what we talked about at the last meeting. So that is where things stand for shoreline zoning and for the public hearings. That's pretty much it. What
Well,
you got?
it's enough work, honestly.
Not much has changed since workshop and everything else because we got the ordinances done. So
Right.
they're just kind of now going through the process. So other than that,
Okay.
we can.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
So I'd like to add this small discussion while we have a few minutes and you guys are here to talk about tonight. Michael and I were having a conversation earlier today about the idea of just being able to provide to applicants a list of things that the planning board generally expects to see in an application. To offer some guidance right off the bat so that they have a list they can look at. And it's by no means intended to be complete, but it's intended to be an aid towards getting applications to the point where we can actually call them complete and then submit them for review. And so hand in hand with this, another part of the conversation, which I don't know, we're going to have tonight about just sort of process. We'll have that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this and then we'll talk about process is, and I think we should beat this up just a little bit and talk about what this means first. And then we want to talk about the idea of adding just a couple more steps to our process in the agenda based on some of the things that we learned in our training session that we recently, which I actually thought was really good. And while I'm on that topic, I just wanted to mention really quickly that I have attended the budget meetings for the town for the upcoming budget for the annual town meeting in June. And I did make a request that we, the planning board receive some funds or set aside some funds for some additional trainings, like similar to the ones that we had where we could bring speakers here instead of us having to go there. which is harder, I think, to
Mhm.
coordinate for everybody. And perhaps it was well received in the Damerscott Planning Board, I think, as well. So if we could do more joint training sessions on specific topics, I expressed an interest. I think Damerscott expressed an
Yeah.
interest. So we have included that a little bit of money in the budget to do potentially 2 in the upcoming year. Is the thought, I think.
That's that. I haven't come up with a, number or anything, but I know you said that was good training and would love to do more similar, similar perspective was mentioned by members of the planning board from in Damerscott too. So
Yeah, I agree. It's much easier to say, get home from work, get down here than it's like, get home from work, go to Augusta.
Yeah.
You know, something.
well, and you can ask questions and
Yeah.
have somewhat of a conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And even though they often offer these on Zoom, it's just not the same. I think it's nice to have the face-to-face ability to have that conversation. All right, so do you want to go through this?
Yeah, sure. This came out of that meeting and the conversation, that one of the things we should be doing is deeming applications complete. Essentially, by the time they get to the planning board, I've gone back and forth with the applicant, and if there's any outstanding information, I kind of work that out ahead of time, so it comes here, all the information that the planning board might need to review an application has been submitted with a few minor exceptions usually. But as far as like kind of the process and timelines and kind of the formal, not that we want it to be like super bureaucratic, but protections both for the applicant and the town is to say, like, when an application comes in, is it complete? And how can I say confidently to an applicant, yeah, this is complete, we can take it to the planning board, or this isn't complete, like, I don't want to send it to the planning board. And if they, they can always push it, like, I'm used to go to the planning board, because I can't really make any decisions. But that way it can be, comes to you all and you say, yeah, this is complete, great, we can actually start now, versus no, you're still missing your whatever plan, and we're not going to, the clock isn't starting because you haven't given us the application. So that, of course, is easier said than done. And so I started putting together what might be a list of, here's the checklist basically of, if we have all of these things, it can be considered. In other places, they'll kind of have this list as, and that function kind of administratively, where it's like, just happens in the office, nothing gets through to either like the code enforcement officer or the planning board, or whoever's going to be doing the review, unless that checklist is completed. We will just handle it. Most smaller towns handle it at the planning board. We can continue to do that, but this is the list that I came up with when I said, what kinds of things do we need? I should say there's a difference between the list of items and submission, documents that need to be submitted, and the planning board deciding that they have all the information that is required to make the decisions and to actually approve or reject or whatever the application. And so I noted that, I think up at the top, which we can get into, but this is just like, if somebody comes to the planning board and says, I want to do a thing, what documents do you need? These are the documents we need. If there's any information that is not provided, the planning board can always ask for it. But I guess we can kind of get into all the details as we go through this.
Yeah, and I want to add that while it looks like we're adding a lot of potential burden here, I think the goal and the emphasis that we struck in both the comprehensive plan and the core zoning code of simplicity and efficiency and, timeliness of application review, so that reviewing things doesn't take months and months and months like it used to, like, that's still primarily the goal. And when I was talking about this with Michael, I actually used the words, I said, I think for a lot of these, we're not we need to be very clear that we're not requiring engineering work. We're not requiring architectural drawings. This could literally be crayons on the back of a napkin, as long as it actually gives us something that we can review the standard against. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So my simple off the cuff examples were just like, if you're going to be putting a building on a lot, well, we need to see the lot. And we need to see where you're putting the building so that we know that you're meeting the setback standards. Like, again, it could be crayon, but we just need to know both to be able to say, yes, it meets the standard. And then later for the code enforcement officer to be able to say, yes, you built it to what you said you were going to.
It has to
And-
have some degree of sort of accuracy. I mean,
Yeah, well,
some evidence that there's reality in what you've drawn, but it doesn't have to have an architect's
stamp.
stamp.
I don't think it has to be to scale, to be honest with
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on what's being proposed
Right.
but I could imagine someone saying, yeah, I want to build a, 20 by 20, accessory building basically, in my backyard. And they can show that, it's 50 feet away from any property line. It's 50 feet from the house and it's going to be 10 by 10. Like, do we care if it's a little askew? No. Do we care if it's 20 and 1/2 foot? Maybe, but like, that's the kind of,
Right.
no one's going out there with a laser to be like, it went an inch over, unless you're going over a property.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a big project and you're really cutting it close to setbacks, then I think that's more appropriate. You've got a house lot, it's 300 feet of frontage and I'm gonna be this far and everything. It's
Right.
like well within, like, yeah, we don't care if your lines are skewed a little bit.
Right. And they don't need to be signed, sealed plans, engineered necessarily. I mean, if that's what it takes to prove that you meet the standard, then that may end up being required, but at least to check the box, I think it's like, okay, we have a site plan, great, then we can start moving forward with it. And if the planning board determines that you want to kind of tighten those screws and say, no, we need an actual survey for certain projects, like, we can say that. But I think just to start with like a kind of generally, here's what we're looking for. I think it will help applicants and it also will help me, it'll help the planning board, and it'll help kind of just the whole process.
So, I mean, this looks like a lot, but there are certain things you just have to do.
Yeah, and this list I put together, this is not exhaustive or I can just run through. The application form is
Obviously,
that's what we've got. We may want to revise that so that it's a little more clear, but whatever. I said a deed on here, but really it's just that like right title standing, showing that you're not proposing to build a house on your neighbor's property or something.
so I got a question about that.
Mhm.
Does that need to be a document that we need to require because we've never required?
We should.
Is it good enough? Is it good enough to just get, since we're on TV, is it good enough to just say, this is your property, right? And they say, yes, I am the landowner.
I think it may be. It came up at the training, and I don't remember exactly what the details were that Bill said, where before it used to be, if there was a dispute between like, well, is the property line here or here, that as long as the planning board had some generally say like, okay, well, we're pretty sure that, that you own it, you've provided a deed that says you own it, so we'll just give you a benefit of the doubt. And that was enough. But he was saying something about like more recently, it's getting to the point where unless the planning board, basically the planning board should say, unless you have kind of a clear, if there's any kind of question, go figure it out, is essentially what he said. Now, I don't know, all of the details. I don't think providing a deed's all that hard. I mean, you can get it online. It's at the registry of deeds, the county. All you need to do is show that, like, here I have my name's on this deed, and this deed is for that property. So,
The only reason I question it is because if you require it on all, just building a deck, you don't want to go find a deed. You don't want to pay to have a deed printed off. And like, that's just overly burdensome
yeah,
in my
I
mind.
hear,
So-
I hear you. Well,
I'd like to just make the suggestion that maybe to meet this requirement, we could say, we could have language on this that we give to applicants that says, the assumption is that you have a deed, you are the landowner. If this is not the case, you must provide explanation and reason for why you're submitting this application for land that is not yours.
I
You
think,
know, would the town get into trouble in some way if the somebody came to the planning board? We approved their plan, not having checked that they own the land, but they went and did it. Would that be the, it's not like the town is saying, well, we give you authorization to do whatever you wanted to do, and that overrides whether you own the land or not. I mean,
Right.
it seems like
I mean, the onus is
to
always
build
on
on
the,
some, your neighbor's property is always gonna be, you know, you're gonna be the one who's held liable for, you know.
if you end up building it on someone else's property,
Yeah.
right, whether or not
That's
we
got
tell
it.
you can or not. You know, I don't know, this is definitely where like an attorney should
Yeah.
weigh in. I think for the situation that you're talking about where somebody's coming, and especially if it's like, it's a property owner. If they're, I guess what we might be able to do is say like, look, if it's your name that's on the tax card, which is the town's records, then we can go off of that assumption. And, you know, maybe it's just, but I think that once you get beyond that of like, this is your house where you live, and, you know, that's what, that matches your driver's license or whatever, you know, and what's on the tax cards, great. But if it's someone who's coming along and saying, like the solar application, like that's not the property owner, I think that's when you start to get into like, okay, well, now we definitely need something saying that you are authorized to act on behalf of the, or, you know, or why you're the applicant, because there are plenty of situations where someone else comes in and is saying like, I have an option to buy this, and that can be, it can be that.
you're
easy,
the
you know?
developer, you're the contractor, you're the whatever.
Yeah.
It happens.
I know a couple people that in different towns were interested in buying a piece of property, but they didn't know if they were allowed to do what they wanted to do on the property.
Mhm.
So they went and submitted an application
Mhm.
to that town allowed. You didn't have to show a deed or be the property owner.
Mhm.
And then they would get the permit or not get the permit. And that pretty much that made their decision for them whether they were going to buy the property or not.
Yeah.
They
and I
want to
think-
buy and then turn out, oh, we can't
We
do what
can't
we want
do
to do.
That's, I mean, that does happen.
But-
I think it's happened to us where someone has come and said, I'm trying to remember who, but it was, I have an option to purchase. I want to make sure that what I want to do is doable before I actually buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Because sometimes people are like, well, according, like I read through the code and it seems like it would be fine, but I'd feel a lot more comfortable if I actually had a
Mhm.
physical permit that's saying, yes, I can do that. But I don't know
Yeah.
if that'd be just a conditional thing
Right.
that would be just added on to approval.
You mean
If-
like if an applicant came with, that had an option to purchase something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would want to address it somehow, but it's not that unusual to like for people to buy a piece of property, get a permit to build, to develop it or whatever it is, and then sell that property, and that approval is still valid and can transfer to whoever it is, that, you know, that you sell it to. So that happens.
Which is different from getting approval to do something on land you don't actually own.
Right.
Yeah, but you might.
And that's where I'm not sure. That's where I think, you know, I don't think that it's probably not an efficient use of the planning board's time to be approving or reviewing applications that someone can't actually execute. It's like, yeah, you could build it, but you don't own the land. So like, why are we looking at this?
I think if they have because I know that we've done it, I'm just,
Yeah.
my mind is blanking.
Yeah. It's like.
But if they have a purchase and sale agreement.
Mhm. Yeah.
Then they have right.
Right. Right. And that's why, like, I put a deed on here because that's like, if you own a piece of property, you have a deed, but that's why I said, or some other display of right title or standing. Because there's any number of ways you could go about this. It just needs to be like, yeah, okay, then this is reasonable. You're not just some guy who's like, that piece, and can I build on it? You know,
Right.
Want to build a
No.
dock down here on the shore.
right.
Someone else's land.
Yeah, it's not quite on my
It's
land.
not-
Yeah, if I ever bought that
Yeah.
land, it would
And
be.
it's like, oh, the town said I could do it. You know, like,
Yeah.
we don't. So, but I think I appreciate your point because I think that ultimately the like nailing this stuff down, what I would like is to make it as easy as possible, the process easier. So, you know, I only say like, well, we need to see that right title and standing is more of like a legal, we want to make sure we're doing this
Well,
kind of by the
I
book.
like your suggestion where we should require paper of that deed display of right title or standing if your name doesn't match
Right.
the name on the property card.
Yeah.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. I mean, I just don't, I don't
Yeah.
want people having to get a deed to do a deck. That's just,
Yeah, I mean, I was assuming a deck goes with the planning board, but yeah, any project that. Yeah, could be a small project, it still ends up.
I think some of the other aspect of it is like, if there are any there's any conditions on that property, we should be checking that to see like, oh, well, is there like a conservation easement on that lot? I think that's where, you know, we might get into like
oh, if we had the deed, we'd know.
well, yeah, I mean, we're not doing a full like title search on it, but like,
No,
do you say, okay, well, we have the deed, great, is there anything attached to this deed that says, you know, X, Y, and Z? I think that is basically showing like, do you have the right to do the thing you're proposing to do? Now, I don't know if part of that is like the efficiency of like, you know, we're not super overwhelmed right now, but so I don't know if it's municipalities saying like, we don't have to listen to your case, or we don't have to listen to we don't have to review your application unless you can show that you actually have some standing. Or if it's like, well, we're trying to protect the town. You know, I don't know if it's
yeah,
which side it is, but you know, I think I can look into that and see if there's any.
I mean,
obvious
yeah, I mean, it
solutions,
would be
but-
good to know.
Whose responsibility?
It's always on the applicant.
You need language in there saying.
Yeah, but I think we can put soft language instead of hard languages. I guess my point.
Yeah,
is-
well,
Yeah,
I I think that there is some responsibility on the municipality, but that's where I don't know where it kind of starts and stops.
well, let's find out. All right, so letter from BSD. I mean, if you're in the district, obviously that's required.
Yeah, all right, that's as applicable, basically.
Proof of public notice. If you're coming to the planning board, you have to provide proof of public. That's just a requirement.
I think so. Well, we have a small project plan. I think, you know, like if George were to kick something up, you don't necessarily have to have a public hearing.
That's a good point, actually. It's really only large project plans, special permit, subdivision, master plan, those all require public notice. But small project plan doesn't. That's a good point. I guess make that distinction.
Yeah, I'm gonna say like when required, maybe.
Yeah.
Like when.
So then the site plan existing and proposed. I mean, these are just basic things that we have to know. Except, I guess I question the existing circulation on small project plans. We don't need to know, potentially.
because there may not be any, or because it's just not,
Yeah, I mean,
we don't regulate.
we don't regulate. Right. So, I mean, if you're just building, if for some reason, maybe because it's in shoreline, the CEO wants the planning board to review it. But all I've got basically is a driveway, like we don't require that because we don't regulate driveways. It's just a
Right.
driveway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think this is where you get into that kind of like, well, what constitutes a site plan and how do we determine whether the site plan is complete?
Yeah.
And that's where I think, I put this information under that kind of like indented part is just like, this is what we probably need, and maybe that's more guidance for the applicant rather than, if you don't have lot dimensions on your site plan, I might tell you, you're gonna need lot dimensions on there before the planning board will consider it complete. But if they say like, that's a site plan, like that's good, take it to the planning board. Yeah, fine. You got a site. Yeah, I'll give you that. Does it provide all the information the planning board is gonna need? No, but it's like,
And then obviously for what's being proposed, yes, lot dimensions, buildings. And wetlands. So yeah, again, I mean, we can take the next four: landscape, lighting, circulation, parking. Those are lifted straight from site,
landscape. Yeah, and that's
right? Those are site,
a part of site.
site plan
And I put a
in
note
the
down
core
here that
zoning code, right?
they all can be combined as long as all the necessary information is provided. Like,
Right, but I think the same consideration applies, right? Small project plan versus large project plan.
right, and maybe
We
that's what we
never
need to do.
require lighting plans for small projects.
Okay, and so that's what we should do is have this set, because I didn't get into like subdivision.
Right.
So
So,
I think,
yeah, it's a complete application for small plan, complete, I mean, this form is not one and the same. Or
It might be it
all
might be a
plans.
table.
Maybe there's like, which
Right.
kind of plan are you proposing?
Right.
Then you need, this is your list.
yeah.
It might be a table.
Well, and if it's simple enough, you could also always say like, here's what's required for all applications or for
Right.
small project plan, and then for large project plan, you also need to provide that.
And for subdivision and
For subdivision, you need to provide.
Yeah.
Subdivision might be different enough, and we've talked about like if we adjust that so that like site plan is one thing and subdivision is something else.
Right.
That could also be subdivision, there might not be building plans, so like you're not gonna have building. You don't need building elevations for your subdivision.
Yep.
So I think maybe splitting out by like what type of plan, especially if we're not gonna end up with like, oh, well, there's 6 different flavors of small project plans and 7 different large project plan types.
Right.
Then,
right.
so,
Okay, well, I mean, either doing it the way you said or a table, I think something that's whatever is easiest to understand.
Mhm.
Does make sense because there's enough, just reviewing this, obviously, we're like, well, it may apply, it may not apply. And I think we want to be, again, this is just guidance, but we want it to be as clear and clean as possible, right?
right.
Erosion,
I didn't check the applicability of that ordinance. I know it came up. That's,
it's, I hate that one. I think what it says, and it's not verbatim, but it says basically like for any project that requires a building permit.
Basically like, you need to do this if you need to do this.
Right,
Like, that's not helpful.
that's not helpful.
So I think,
So,
that also, a lot of the stuff in erosion control is really construction side of things. It's
It is.
not planning board.
Yep.
Stuff, so.
so also stormwater, which isn't on here,
Mhm.
and floodplain.
I had.
Well,
Oh,
flood
the
hazard area.
topographic. plan.
Topographic.
Yeah.
plan, Yeah.
So
So what else did you mean by topographic plan other than floodplain?
I mean, I guess we're we could just have someone show us where the line is for flood hazard, but if you're doing grading, then the flood hazard line is gonna move, you know, and so it's an elevation, and so that's why I'm like, at least for me, it makes sense to like, let me get a topographic map that shows like, here's elevation 11, and that's the flood hazard, so here's everything that's at elevation 12, great, and you're gonna be grading something, and they show somewhere that goes down to 11 somewhere else, like, well, you're
It becomes flood hazard.
now you're going below the flood hazard, so that's why I do that, so that you can kind of make it, I guess, like a dynamic decision rather than just like, it's not like, you know, water obviously doesn't just stop at the line. It doesn't.
Where are you thinking that that would be, required?
Just within, if you're within the flood hazard, if your site is,
Regardless of permit type.
yes, I think that's how,
So how do people know if they're in the flood? This is the problem I've always had, is how do you know you're in the flood?
you go to FEMA's website basically, well, on which we have. I can look up and check.
Does it come up in that map on the site?
Yeah, I think there's
One of the, one
might
of the
be all
layers
the
you
layers
can
you
turn
can-
on. They-
Yeah, you may be right. And
So-
Jones viewer.
Then, that seems to me like that should go like really close to the top of the list of things to check before you go further.
Yeah.
I mean, it's along with existing wetlands, site plan, existing conditions, wetlands. Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, why are you even listing wetlands if not because you might?
Well, I think the reason I put wetland, streams, rivers, whatever, is to be like, are you in shoreline?
Right.
There's also the, smaller wetland things that you're gonna have to consider. I didn't put it on here, but like if you're filling in a wetland, we want to know, because we want to make sure you're not filling it enough that we have to go to DEP and all that.
Right.
The topographic plan, I think, really is, I guess what I should say is, yeah, it says flood hazard area only. It's really like, if you're not in the flood hazard area, we don't need a topographic plan. If you are in a flood hazard, then we need this. And I guess the way that I think about it is, it's like, how do you know what zone you're in? Like, you gotta check the map. There's one more. So you got shoreland, zoning, flood hazard.
But again, do you have to? There's a distinction still there. If you have an existing building in floodplain and you're doing an addition, or you're doing a deck, or you're doing like an attached garage, do you actually have to provide that topographical map?
I think it's
I'm admitting my ignorance here because I'm not as familiar with floodplain ordinances. I probably should be.
so. I think that's I guess it's kind of the same as all of this. Like, technically, you probably don't need to provide most of these like site plans and things, because you could probably write out, the walls will be this far from that. So I think having a topographic map, especially kind of what you're talking about, where you have an existing condition, and that may be where it makes more sense. Because the thing about a floodplain really is, it doesn't stop you from doing anything per se. It's not as though like, oh, you're in a floodplain, you can't build it.
Mhm.
It's really like, oh, you're in a floodplain. Okay, well, you just can't build grade on slab, slab on grade. You have to lift the building up out of it. So like, you could build a building on piers. I don't exactly. I'd have to look at the code, and I don't know what building codes are also. So that's where I think you'd want the information to be like, oh, well, if you just put the building back 5 feet, it would automatically raise it up. I mean, planning board doesn't need to say, here's what you could or should do.
Mhm.
But I think that having a topographic map, if we're trying to deal with elevation, because that's what it's all about. It's basically like floodplains at 11, and you want to build your bottom of your floor has got to be at 3 or 4 feet. It's got to be like 3 feet above the flood hazard high water. So that's where the topographic just kind of gives you that, hopefully that like 3D, that asking for three-dimensional.
So that, I mean, sort of just like this conversation about this, links to anything that we can provide links to go on this, like, so
Mhm.
it's is an easy check mark for people. You know what I mean? It's like, follow this link, put in your property, print out the map, you're done.
Yeah, because the map on the town website does have the FEMA National Flood Hazard Layer, wetland maps.
You could turn on those layers,
Yep,
print out
and-
that map, we're done.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
You know, and I think the other thing is if you provide that topographic map, because the flood hazard layers are notoriously rough.
Mm.
So if you come in, and it's the same thing with shoreline zoning. It's like if we look at the map and it says there's a stream there, the planning board, we just assume that there is a stream there, and the applicant can come in and say like, oh, we did a survey and the stream is actually exactly here. And so with flood hazard, it's the same thing. Like you say,
But there's no way for the applicant to say, no, the 100-year flood isn't gonna happen here.
well,
It's over there.
they can if they provide a topographic map and say the flood hazard elevation here is 11 feet.
Is defined as 11 feet above.
I think it's like mean high tide.
But what if the flood hazard is not the ocean? The flood,
So yeah,
and I'm just looking at it and it's like, it's the creek behind your house. It's
Yeah.
literally the creek behind your house.
Yeah.
11 feet above. Well, you have to go out and
Yeah.
survey it.
I think they still do it basically from sea level. But that's well, no, I mean, what they'll say is like it'll be like 40 feet. You know, the flood hazard elevation there is 40 feet. Yeah, the inland stuff is a little bit weirder, and
Yeah, because the thing that's flooding isn't. doesn't-
no, but it still is. It's still it still all is. Yes, it tilts a little bit because you know it drains over here, like the Damascata River or whatever. It's
Yeah,
tidal, but it's always like a foot or something higher here than it is at the mouth, at least
Yeah,
low tide. Anyway, if you could do a survey, you could provide that and say, here's the elevation is at least, you know, here. 100 feet that way is not gonna be that much of a difference between here and there.
Mhm.
And if you can get a survey that shows, well, here's where that elevation line is on my property. You especially with as inaccurate as the flood hazard maps are, you can show like this is 4 feet higher than the rest of my property. You know, this is basically saying that the flood hazard elevation here is this elevation. This hill is, you know, 2 feet above that. So I'm actually not in it once you have good information. Which all of this is.
I mean, I get the argument. Obviously it's something that has to be considered. I want to ensure that we're not adding layers of complexity to the application process.
And that this is one of the things that is frustrating to me is like, how is the planning board supposed to figure out, are you in the flood hazard or not, when like they give you inaccurate information, you don't have really good, and it's not that the applicant, I'm not saying that they don't give you the good information, I'm saying FEMA doesn't either. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm trying to understand it so I can say, okay, well, do you can you pull a topographic map, or can we find a topographic map from somewhere that shows, and then we can look and basically say, okay, because sometimes otherwise the default is, yeah, it shows that your property is in the floodplain, even though it's a hill and it's clearly higher than everything around it.
Can I ask another question? I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm just wondering, does the fact that you're within the 100-year flood zone, does that prevent you from building, or is it just inadvisable? Because
It's
is there anybody,
No, you just gotta build up.
yeah, you have to build up, and
you
basically
do
you
have
can't-
to build up
Yeah.
according to
FEMA.
FEMA?
And flood, you can't get flood insurance, you know,
Okay.
there's other things that, so you wouldn't be able to get a mortgage basically if you if you built a house and then wanted to sell it, nobody who needed a mortgage could buy that house.
Could get 'em.
And there's a program, and I don't know all the details, but basically municipalities that opt into the FEMA flood hazard
Hmm.
program get discount, the residents there get discounted rates on insurance, reduced rates on insurance because the town has flood hazard ordinance and, you know, these other things. They don't make it simple, and that's why I'm
Yep.
trying to like, okay, well, if we just get a topographic map, like we can know enough of what we're talking about, the applicant can say, you know, we can help rather than just be like, no, figure it out and tell us whether or not you can do it.
So can I propose a middle ground on that? Which is that we strike the balance again between small project plan and large project plan as being the divide maybe between where small project plan, the town will take the responsibility of determining floodplain compliance and tell you for the application, which would mean that you and the CEO would actually help in doing that because those applications more often than not don't come to the planning. They're handled administratively.
What I would say is we maybe don't make it explicit that the town is going to be responsible for figuring it out.
No, but we make explicit that if you're doing a large project plan, special permit, subdivision, master plan, the applicant must do it.
Sure. I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is like, from what I see, because you know, a lot of the stuff goes to George. When you're dealing with a, you know, homeowner one-on-one, it's you're trying to help. Like, oh, I can get you the FEMA flood. Like, I'll check that. Oh, I guess what I'm trying to avoid is the default that is overly strict. Because when you look at a map, you kind of, it's like with zoning, the boundaries are vertical. You know, you could imagine there's
Yeah.
like a wall.
Right.
Where with flood hazard, it's not really like that. It's not that there's a wall, it's just like there's a floor.
Yeah.
And so you look at a map and you're like, oh, well, it ends there, but it doesn't. It ends there because then, you know, the ground is there.
Right.
So that's why it's just not, but I think to your point, I think we have to figure out I think like an elegant solution for this because we don't want it to like scare people away of saying like, oh, this can't do it because,
I'm in the floodplain, or I
Yeah.
don't know how to find that.
and I have no idea what that means. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, which is why, you know, I'm here, which is why George is here, just to kind of I think, be more helpful. But I also don't want to say like, oh, it's on us. So that way, when there's a problem,
Yeah.
you know, someone's like,
No,
well,
I get that. I get that. I just, again,
If it's by mission, you know, you must provide it in these cases. You know, okay, for you, but we're not gonna explicitly say that.
yeah, I'll let me think about.
yeah,
I
yeah,
want an easier solution
yeah. Yeah, I get it.
than,
I mean, the big one that's left is an explanation of how all applicable standards are met by the application. It's pretty vague.
yeah,
And everything else.
yeah. I think, so like I go through and do the finding of fact.
Yep.
I don't think I don't want to say it's not my responsibility. I do it because I'm like, oh, let's get this stuff through. But I'm also thinking about like, well, if this town or any town doesn't have a planner, and it's 5 or 7 or however many residents who are going through this, it's not really the planning board's responsibility to try and argue that that the standard's been met. So
The applicant's responsible.
yeah, and to say like, what's your setback? And they're like, oh, well, it's right here, but it's in, you know, tiny print. You're like, oh, okay, yep, I see that. Like, the planning board shouldn't have to be going and digging through and saying, okay, well, you know, where is that shown? Oh, it's shown on whatever. And then there's also just some things that you can't show graphically, right? That's basically like uses you don't show graphically and any other standards like that.
So this is just a general guidance statement. Is that what you're trying to say?
Kind of,
It's not
kind of
like a requirement. I mean, it's an obvious thing. Obviously, you have to demonstrate that your application meets the standards. And that burden is on the applicant,
Yeah,
not on the plan.
right, but it doesn't. The reason I put it in here, because I think it gets overlooked a lot. I do get applications, and it's usually when like if there's an engineering firm that's involved and they usually provide way more than you want, but they go through and say, like, here's this standard, here's how it's met, here's this standard, here's how it's met. I can't remember. There was an application recently, I think it was here. It's like 2 pages, it's nice, like, yep, you hit it, you didn't hit everything. But and you talked about some things that weren't relevant, but fine, good, that's good. I think it's kind of like, it is the applicant's responsibility. Don't make us, work so that you can build your. Basically, don't put it on us, it's on you. You tell us how you missed it. And also, just so that people do submit something. Because like I said, you get it when it's an engineering firm, they're like, oh, here's the letter that goes along with this. A lot of times you just get some people are just like, here's a picture of the house. Okay, I'll take a look, see what I can make heads and tails of.
Yes, okay. I gotta think about that one.
Yeah.
Because I'd like it to be clear what you're saying. Your point is valid, but I don't want it to be a stumbling block.
Yeah.
Or onerous.
But
The only
not
other
for a small
thing,
project.
yeah, exactly. The only thing that's not on here that I want to make explicit is that if you're submitting an application to build a new building type, whatever it is, we do not require a floor plan. But we do require elevations of all sides of the building with dimensions and dimensions of windows and doors where applicable.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a stumbling block. I think people are familiar with the idea that I'm going to build a building. Here's my floor plan. And the way our ordinance works is we don't care.
What's inside?
What's inside the building.
Yeah.
Like you do what you want inside the building. We're much more concerned with the size and scale of the building from the outside. We need those dimensions, and we need the dimensions of the windows and doors in the districts where there are standards around those. And so I think that just needs to be made explicit.
So I did under building plans, I did put floor plans, said all floors, exterior and general interior details only. And I only said, I would have said, exterior details only. But yeah, I mean, I guess we don't really need anything interior. Really was just kind of so that we could say, okay, where exactly, but.
I don't think we need anything. And in fact, the only thing that we are concerned with on the interior building are things that are not within the scope of our review, such as plumbing.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, now unit size is gonna be a thing. And there may be some, like, if you're talking about components that are integral, or you may want a floor plan, but I'm happy to leave it off. Because I agree, all we really care about is the exterior of a building, but you could have a floor plan that shows, this is the exterior of the building, shows just basically the outside, and the details on the inside are.
It wouldn't, but as you say, that a floor plan is plain.
Right.
That's what the floor plan is. It's the elevations that are, that's what the code regulates.
Well, I want to make it again clear. I'm sorry I keep saying this, but like it really tripped us up when we did the review for the proposed building at the end of Pleasant Street. Because he gave us first the floor plans. And when you compare and contrast the floor plan against the elevation, it was unclear what was the main mass of the building versus what was a component of the building. And when you looked at it one way, like from the elevation, it was, you can make the argument, this is the main mass, this is a component. But when you look at the floor plan, you're like, well, that's not a component.
Right,
That's integral to the building.
right.
So it should count as main mass. That's confusing. And I'm trying to eliminate that from happening again.
Right, so if you eliminate the floor plan, we only have that one point of reference to, you may come to a different conclusion. But you may spend less time coming to that conclusion because you're not sort of, but what about?
But even I think I think like I think a lot of people struggle to understand a building, not the interior, but just like the exterior of a building, if you don't provide them with a floor plan as well. And when I say floor plan, I just mean like the building footprint, like that, and to understand like, oh, that's what this floor is. It's this. When we're talking about this measurement on, this measurement on the elevation is this measurement on the plan. Okay, I see now. If you're just looking at a square, you're like, okay, that's not that hard. You could just get the 4 exterior views and be like, I understand this goes together. Once it starts to get a little more complicated, I think that's when you're like, all right, now I want to see a plan so I understand, oh, this is where that cut in is.
Right, I mean, that's what happened on the Plum Street. It was like, well, is this front of the house and then there's these 2 additions, these features on the front, or is this the front of the house with the thing indented into the main mass?
It took us a long time.
Yeah, it was a lot of.
And I'm thinking about another very common example around here, which is like you got the house, which is just a rectangle, say 2 stories. It has a little tiny connector to a garage,
Mhm.
right? We see that all the time. You got a breezeway connecting the house to the garage. You see it all the time, everywhere. Very, very common. I don't want to get into the, well, what is a connector? How big is that connector? If you're looking at the floor plan and the interior walls don't meet the exterior spaces of the connector. Like if a bathroom or a powder room is inside the connector. And you
Is the
see it in the
connector
floor
actually
plan,
part of the mass? And not
and
a
you're like,
connector?
well, that's part of the house, not the connector. But we're only really concerned about the
It looks-
dimensions of the footprint of the outside of the.
Yeah. And
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And that's why what I'm struggling with is how do you say like we want floor plans, but we don't want to know anything about the inside of the house. Essentially, is I think what,
No.
so that's where it's like, yeah, we don't care we don't want to know where the bathroom. Don't even tell us where the bathroom is. What we care about is just the exterior line. So
Yeah.
that's why I say, the when I put all floors, exterior and general interior details only. General interior details, I was just thinking about, if we're doing unit size, it might be good to have them show, all right, here are the units. This one's 600 square feet. This one's 500. This one's 750, whatever. But we also can just, we can say, just we don't need to see it. You can tell us the unit size, like in a spreadsheet, it'd be fine.
Okay, so I think we should wrap this conversation up,
Mhm.
but I would like to make the suggestion that while you're working on sort of fleshing this out,
Yep.
which I think is great,
Yep.
fantastic, we can just sort of set the goal that it doesn't exceed 2 pages.
Oh yeah.
So that it could be printed front and back of a
Mhm.
single piece of paper and distributed easily.
Yeah, I would like it to just be, if it could be like 5 things for small project, 5 things for, 8 things for a large project and whatever. Like, so we can go through, we can provide a little bit of an explanation of like, you're probably going to want to include this, and this on their site plan, but like,
Right.
we need a site. Yep. The other thing that I just wanted to mention was, no specific dimension should be provided for the main building map as well as any additions and components. What I would like to do is make it clear, like, we don't really care how wide the overall building is. What we want to know is how big is the main building mass, and then provide dimensions for the components and additions and things, because then you don't have to like do all that math. And hopefully that will kind of guide people in the direction of, they only have 50 feet wide. Oh, but it's the main building.
Yeah.
And then if they're like, oh, my building is gonna end up being, I don't know how wide my building is, and we can be like, we don't care how wide your building is either. You
Yeah,
know,
right,
because
yeah.
building mass is the only thing we're looking at, or a main building mass is the only
Yeah,
thing we're looking
so-
at. And then-
Right.
So I don't know how the best way to handle and make that explanation is, but
No, I mean, take a stab at it. I like it. And I know that's a different way of people think about it, and questions come up more than once,
yeah,
you know,
but I,
in some ways it's a whole heck of a lot easier,
I think
the way that we do.
I think, yeah, once people get used to it. Once I got wrapped my head around it, I was, oh, so you mean like the way that I understand the building? Got it.
Yeah, it is exactly the way you naturally understand a building. Nobody goes to buy a house and, you know, goes, oh, it's 73 point, you know, and 3 inches across the front.
Yeah.
They're like, well, building it's a 30 by 40 and then it's got a garage.
Right.
That's how you understand buildings.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, when you look at it, you're like, it's a cape with someone added a garage. Got it. You kind of,
Yeah.
they're two,
Right.
unless you're talking about like Frank Gehry or something.
Yeah. All righty. So, thank you for that. I look forward to seeing it, a little more fleshed out. The only other thing I want to add is that in terms of procedure for upcoming application reviews, based on what we learned in the workshop, I think we should before the public hearing, kind of how we've been doing. So like, we have an application for review. Michael's prepared the conclusions of law finding of fact. We, as we've been doing as our typical thing, we ask the applicant to come up, describe their project. We may say a couple things about it, and then we open a public hearing about the project for members of the public, maybe here for public comment. And then we close the public hearing after all that is done, and then we begin the review. But before we do the review, we should take a vote on whether or not anybody has a conflict. And then we should also make an actual vote on whether the application is complete, so that it is recorded as being complete and ready to review application. Is that what we talked about?
Yeah, well, more or less, I was gonna suggest like that you determine an application is complete. Like today, okay, if we had 84 Academy Hill, we had Zandra's project here. Okay, we wouldn't determine that it's complete because this pre-application meeting doesn't need to be complete. You go through it, you look at it, comments, it's pre-application, it's relatively important. The next meeting, you would, when you got to that item again, you would say, okay, now we're going to 84 Academy Hill Road. And part of your completeness review would be this list we were going over, and did it have the, has it gone through the appropriate steps so far? That's like the proof of public notice, send your mailing now. Did you have your pre-application meeting? Great. Okay. So then your application's complete. Now we can deal with it. Whether we do the conflict of interest item before or after that completeness review, I'm not sure. Probably makes sense to do it before, but
Yeah, it should make sense to do the before. That way, in case if someone does have a conflict, they're not voting on whether the application is complete.
I think that makes sense.
And I mean, if you have a conflict, as a member of the board, it doesn't preclude you from participating in discussion. It just should limit your ability to vote.
And yeah, it certainly doesn't preclude your ability to be informed about what the application is.
Correct.
So I think that completeness review can serve as kind of a marker of pre-application, stuff, all of the messy. Once you get to your deemed complete, it's hopefully a fairly straightforward process of like review, need more information, you get it, you ask for it anyway. Okay, board makes a determination, but you
Yeah.
follow the process.
And the other important aspect of this, the last thing I'll say about this is that by formalizing this and doing it this way, we're actually more closely, well, we're doing actually the process that's outlined in the administrative section the way that it's described as it should be done. And that means that that also means that if that we're very clear about when time frames start and stop. That makes sense? So, for example, in the ordinance, it says, after an application is submitted, the planning board has X number of days to hold a public hearing and review it and issue an approval or denial. And then it says, after the application is deemed complete, so many days before the planning board must issue this, that, or the thing. You know what I mean? Like there's all this timing stuff that is spelled out in the administrative section. And if we just start doing our business that way, it's very clear for the applicant and for us when the clock starts and when the clock runs out on these various things. Instead of, we've been a little hazy.
Yeah, I think that is the timing thing, I don't think is super common in a lot of places in Maine, which I was surprised when I got here that wasn't. But I think like in Portland, probably in larger towns and cities than in other states, like here in Massachusetts, in New Jersey, they did it. Those timelines were, you paid attention, someone would push you.
Well, it sets up clear expectations for how an application is handled, and I like it.
Yeah.
And it gives a reliability on the behalf of the applicant to know that they have a process that we will follow, that it will get reviewed, it won't get swept under the rug, it won't be delayed and delayed and delayed. Right, like we will follow the timeline we say we're going to follow. And having that, I think, is important.
And just want to be clear that if you follow the process, if the town follows that process and handles its business appropriately, like those timelines they really shouldn't be something. They don't really pressure the planning board to be like, oh, we have to approve.
Oh,
this,
they're not onerous
because
and
it's
I should also say, like, we haven't exceeded our timetable ever since the core zoning code came into effect. Like that hasn't been an issue. Like we're not delinquent in reviewing applications. We've been following it. We just haven't been.
Not noting milestones.
Exactly. Yeah. We haven't been, I don't know, not following the code. We certainly have that. It's just being a little bit more specific about it. I think.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I got. Anybody got anything else? You? All right. Without objection? No objection? Meeting adjourned. Time is 7:55.